It will take a lot more than tanks and bombs to separate the people from their land. That's what the people say. This is not just an empty Arab slogan. This is real. We're Palestinians. Our story is riddled with suffering. It doesn't have to be. People in Gaza don't want to suffer. But this is what's happening to them. This is the price to pay for being attached to their land. And what the Israeli government did not take with genocide, they're not going to take in negotiation.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud. All about humanity, so this right here for everyone. Uplift, amplify, empower everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're living in, it's time for Sumud.
On this episode of the Sumud Podcast, we uplift, empower, and amplify Hani Almadhoun. Hani is a Senior Director of Philanthropy at UNRWA USA. In 2024, he co-founded the Gaza Soup Kitchen, preparing meals for communities devastated by Israel's genocidal attacks. A Palestinian American who grew up in Gaza, Hani has lost over 150 family members to Israel's indiscriminate assaults, an unimaginable loss that fuels his unwavering advocacy for Palestinian rights and humanitarian aid.
We are your hosts, Hasan and Zaina Ashrawi. As always, please don't forget to subscribe wherever you watch or listen and follow us on social media at Sumud Pod or at Sumud Podcast. We're also thrilled to announce the launch of our new website, sumudpod.com. Not only will you be able to find links to our social media accounts, where and how you can view and hear this podcast, but also how to support us. So please visit sumudpod.com. Welcome, Hani. It's an honor to have you on the podcast today. There's so much to talk about, Hani, and we're thrilled that you're with us. But before we delve into all kinds of other issues, I want to ask you about your own childhood in UAE and later in Gaza. And I cannot really do that without asking about your parents, Palestinian parents. Where are they from in Palestine? How did they end up in the UAE?
My parents are descendants of the Nakba. My dad was born about 3 years after Nakba, the first child for his parents to be born in a refugee camp in Jabalia camp. At the time, the camps were just nothing more than a glorified tent and a public bathroom where folks can go and just do their thing. Their life was difficult. That's where my dad was born. The year after that, my mom was born. Distant cousins living in the same block. They're originally from the town of Asqalan, Ashkelon in Hebrew now, but it's Asqalan or Al-Majdal. At these camps in Jabalia, the camps were divided based on what town you came from. So they had a block for people who came from Asqalan, a block from people who came from Brer, A, B, C. So everyone would know, like, hey, we're from Section C in the camp, and people in UAE are from this historic town in Palestine. That's where my parents came to know Palestine.
And then their family fled after 1948, or not fled, but they were forced out of Palestine in 1948 due to the ethnic cleansing and the establishment of the colonial state of Israel on our land. And then they ended up in the UAE and built a life there.
Well, I mean, it's a long story. So my grandparents were ethnically cleansed from Al-Majdal, and my grandma left Asqalan first, and she knew my grandfather may not just go to Gaza. So she left with her parents, and she said, hey, you have the kids, bring him with you. He may went to Haifa, maybe. He was thinking about that. But because he had the kids, he just said, okay, I'll just walk him to Gaza. In fact, he left the chicken in the oven cooking, thinking he's going to come back. It's a 20-kilometer trip. There was some early cars, maybe some livestock pulled carts. So he went there and he took the kids, and then he wasn't allowed to go back. Sounds familiar. And so that's how stories started. And then they found themselves in Jabalia in the middle of nowhere, where no food and nothing. And local people, a bakery would give them bread every now and then in Jabalia. And eventually they will get tents and things like that. But they were on the road for a while and they couldn't go back. It was real. They had a neighbor named Layla, whose husband was a daredevil. He would go back to Al-Majdal and come back. And the Israeli army showed up in one day and they shot his wife because they want to send him a message. And that was like a story that my mom kept telling me. And I'm like, wow, she did nothing. Her husband was a daredevil going back and forth. And the message he received, and after that, he stopped going back. And until now, we don't know how that chicken tasted in Al-Majdal.
That's really powerful. They do send messages killing a family member serves as a message to everybody around them. Don't even try to go back to where you came from, like your original home. And they do that now.
Our family knows that too real, as we will explore in this conversation, I hope.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then they ended up in the UAE, the family. I'm assuming that your parents and their parents, your grandparents.
No, just my parents. So my dad went to Egypt. He had a scholarship. I think Jamal Abdel Nasser was giving scholarships to Palestinian students. He ended up in Alexandria, studied English. We're talking about the late 60s, early 70s. He excelled. He went back to Gaza, started teaching. Obviously, mom was in Gaza and they had a child, my brother Mazen. And it was long distance for 4 years. In fact, they were transported from Gaza to Egypt through Red Cross vehicles because, the war was still happening between Egypt and the war of attrition. So the Red Cross would coordinate for them to go to Egypt and he would study English. It was difficult for him because the Egyptian students had a better education system and he's a kid in a refugee camp, a lucky one who has a notebook. But he studied, it was a challenge. And then he came back. He taught in public school in Gaza for about a few years until there was an opportunity. The UAE was being founded at that time and they needed teachers. So they took thousands of Palestinian teachers from Gaza and other places as well. So he got one of those jobs. And in the 80s, he was there, one of the teachers at the UAE.
And so then you all were born. You and the rest of your siblings were born in the UAE?
Correct, yeah. So mom joined him a year later. And in about 1981, I was born in a little town near the borders of Oman. At the time, it was little. It's called Khorfakan. And before me, there was 4 girls. So they felt I was like, hey, here's a special kid. And I was delivered by an Egyptian nurse who got the halawan. When he's like, hey, here's the baby boy. He looks good. So anyway, so that was fun for the family. And we grew up there until the first Gulf War. So I went to school there. In the summer, we would go to Gaza and we'll have memory from there. We had an middle class lifestyle in the UAE, and it was an interesting experience. But then we go back to Gaza and things feel different.
Hani, you aren't a small family. You're a large family, but you were the firstborn boy of the family. How many siblings did you have?
There were originally 5 boys and 5 girls. Some of them are older than me, some of them are younger, but it is a tradition. My grandpa had 10 kids, actually more, probably had 12 at those times. The folks will be stillborn and things like that. And it's the reality. A lot of Palestinians remember those stories. But that's why we want to plug in UNRWA and providing healthcare and things like that. So it is essential. At the time, my parents tell me when they were at the camp, not too many people know these stories. If you have your own private bathroom in your home or your tent or your shelter, you will get attacked and people will tell you, oh, you should not have your private bathroom because that means you're going to still be here and not return to Asqalan. So there was only public bathroom. So there was a time, I think there was Egyptian army presence at the time. If you build your own bathroom, the army and certain Palestinian voices, why, how dare you? Because we're going to go back. And people forget that. And now, because we've seen this also be a struggle.
I think it's really interesting because usually when we talk to people, and I think it's fascinating to hear leaving Gaza to the UAE for the betterment of your children and your family, but then my understanding is fleeing the UAE to go back to Gaza. It's an interesting dynamic there. Before you tell us about that move, how old were you when you moved? What was life like in the UAE for you as a child and the family? Because it's crucial to understand how the dynamics shift from Gaza to UAE and then from UAE back to Gaza.
Yeah, I mean, at the time in the UAE, we'd go hang out at a place called Mall Plaza, have Ataris, bikes, and just the regular fun life. And honestly, the biggest change when we left as a child, that when we went to Gaza, there was only 3 or 4 TV channels. I think the Egyptian one, the Jordanian one, and something Israeli, 2 Israeli networks. And I was very traumatized because the TV show I was to watch in the Emirates are not airing in Gaza. So that was really like devastating to me. Yeah. I think it was Voltron or something like that, one of those action figure shows. And in Gaza, they did not have the channel. So I was about 9 years old when we moved back to Gaza from the Emirates. We weren't really forced out from the Emirates. Some people were, some people from Kuwait. My family chose to go back to Gaza because my sisters have gotten into the marriage age, and my dad did not want them to marry outside of Palestine. So this way the family would not be all over the map. So my sisters went back to Gaza to get married, and everybody went there. My dad stayed behind for about 3 years, and then he joined us later in Gaza.
And those for who are listening, who are millennials, Atari was cool before Xbox and PlayStation. We're aging ourselves a little bit here, Hani, but just throwing that out there.
It's always fun. People remember it. I've seen young people wearing cool T-shirts that says Atari.
We brought it back. Now it's cool again, but for many years nobody knew what it was. No, but it's really interesting. You all moved back to Gaza, and you had a big adjustment, obviously. But the specific reason why you moved was because of the first Gulf War, or the Gulf War, correct? It was the early 90s?
Yeah, about late 90 or 91. Obviously, there was some hostility. I'm not aware that we've experienced any of that as a family, but we've heard a lot, especially around Kuwait and things like that. Obviously, it's a big adjustment because your dad is not there. He's working away, but you're also in Gaza. And really, I remember like whenever we go visit Khalid Subhi, especially in the heart of Jabali refugee camp, and tear gas. That's really the first reality check. I'm in Gaza, I'm out in Dubai, not the easy streets of Dubai. And then I'm sitting with my aunt, and then tear gas all over. Like, we're sitting home. It's not like we're in the streets marching. Maybe my cousins were doing that. And then when that happens, everybody in the house is sniffing onions. And they gave me a cologne. They said, here, this is a softie. Let's give him something that he would like. And they gave me cologne. And I remember that I was like, why are they sniffing onions but me cologne? So I just remembered because I came from outside, so they consider us softies. So I always remember that.
Fascinating. And for those who don't know, I grew up in the Intifada, in first Intifada in Ramallah. And one of the reasons why we do sniff onions, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that, first of all, it covers the smell. It smells awful, but also it forces your eyes and your nose to drain everything out. And so it might sound weird to some, but it really does cleanse your face out of the tear gas. Once tear gas hits you, it's a miserable feeling, and onions helps with that.
So we're watermelon people and onion now.
Unfortunately, with the onions. I mean, at that point, you're school age, right? You're in elementary, middle school?
I got to Gaza, and the first grade was fifth grade, but there is an adjustment. I went to Gaza in the fifth grade, and it was mixed. There was boys and girls. And in the Emirates, I did not have that experience at the time. So I was like, whoa, there's girls in our class. And that meant I was always like the first or the second best students. When the girls enter the equation, I'm number 4. So I had to work really harder to be better at school. And then they actually taught us Hebrew. And that was also a new language for me. In the Emirates, I've started learning English, but in Gaza, at the time, they did not start teaching until middle school. So I've forgotten my English, and I learned Hebrew, and I did well for a while until they said, you no longer need to learn Hebrew. And obviously, the strikes, that was a big thing when the schools, sometimes we don't go to school. Here they have snow days, but also when they have a national strike, you do not go to school. And oftentimes you will have masked men showing up at the school, giving a talk or things like that, giving pamphlets. That was new to me. And military jeeps were present, but not to the destructive level right now we're seeing. And it was just a different reality. The Intifada was just in the last leg, but then there was hope.
Yeah, definitely. The difference in dynamic of how Gaza was then and how it is now. We talk about the siege on Gaza, and that came later, a little bit later, but nobody was ever free. In Gaza, it's not like it just started or it's only 17 years of blockade. Gaza was under occupation, and I think people don't realize, all of Palestine is, but specifically to your story, it was under military occupation, and people were still being killed, people were still being imprisoned, held in administrative detention, and worse. Did you ever feel like you wanted to participate in freeing Palestine in those ways, or did you feel like your space in the struggle for liberation was elsewhere at that age?
At the time, obviously, Gaza was under occupation. There was the bone-breaking directive where the Israeli soldiers chose to break their bones, and many of them were filmed in camera. Some of you old enough remember. But it was also more open. There was people would go to Masr, whenever to Egypt, whenever there is a chance, like you just drive your car and go. You could go actually to historic Palestine. You could drive through areas, and areas used to be a couple of soldiers with rifles, nothing as it is now. It seems like a military base. So it was easier for people. There was a lot of people working and building and picking fruits in historic Palestine. So there was an economy. Yes, there was the atrocities, but there was also people making money. We can talk about the siege and the unintended consequences where they choked the economy to the degree that their enemies is the only employer in town. Like, why are you doing this? So that's one. But I remember also as a child, the biggest thing in my time was Sit al-Shuhada. There's 6 Palestinian leaders. I think they were Fatah. They were chased down by Mustaribin, these units that dress like Arab people. And they got these 6 men. They chased them down. And that was just a few blocks away from our family store. And that was like a WTF moment for me. Like I'm still in my formative years. And then these people are like my brother's age, and I could never understand it. They could have detained them, no, 6 people, and it was very horrific. So there was a lot of that. I was really good with studying, so I was focused in school. Our family built a business for us, and I was really buried in that. Every now and then, as a child, you're like, hey, I want to go and participate. And there was, I think, a student group where one time we went at night to, I don't know, to put a Happy Eid sign or something like that. And we're at the school, and somebody chased us down. It was winter. I was wearing a reflective coat. So this guy kept chasing us, and he could only see us in the dark because of my coat. That was my last bit of activism. So I stuck to books and selling things at our store.
I think all of us at some point growing up in Palestine, it's part of who we are. The struggle, especially during the Intifada and afterwards, that's part of who we are, part of life there. So at this point, you're growing up in Gaza, and striving to be the best you can be in the education system. Were you in UNRWA schools or were you in regular school?
So my dad used to be an UNRWA teacher, and because we live in the town of Beit Lahia, the town of Beit Lahia is not a refugee community, so there's public schools there, and it was about a 5-minute walk from our house. So I went to the public school. I must acknowledge the best students in Gaza tend to, for the most part, come from UNRWA schools because the UNRWA affords to bring the best teachers. They have better curriculum. But at the public school, I did okay until we went to high school. After middle school in Gaza, all of the schools are public. So there is no UNRWA school past 9th grade. In Lebanon, it's different. Lebanon is from kindergarten till college. So that was really different. But I never got to go to UNRWA school. But I do recognize the nearest one to us is Al-Fakhura school. And you know it from the many massacres that happened at this school where my dad happened to be one of the teachers there.
And you must have been a good student because you did earn a scholarship to go to the U.S. And if I'm not mistaken, your dad purchased a one-way plane ticket for you, put $800 in your pocket and said, go.
Yeah, this is true. I think in Tawjihi, the high school diploma, I got like 92.4 percentile. And I think the highest at the time was 95 in the whole Gaza Strip. So that was a good grade. But frankly, there was people who got in better grades and competed for the scholarship, and they didn't get it because they needed somebody who can come to the US and just will not stop talking. Because if they bring somebody who's a nerd, who's going to be in their room studying, then you're not adding value to the school in terms of teaching kids from Idaho or Nebraska about, hey, this is how a person from Gaza talks. Don't say stupid stuff at work. So, like things like your English is so good. Like we're adding value to the campus, but also learning in the process and getting a quality education like I did at BYU.
But what was your internal response or your feelings? Because you were always around your family and all of a sudden you're about to go hop on an airplane and your life is going to change forever. What was going through your mind as a young man? I would have been crying personally, just so you know. I don't know if I would have been able to handle that big pivot.
Yeah, we've all struggled with this. It wasn't easy. I was close to my family. Not only we're family, we have a business, we work together. There's many of them, so there's a lot to miss. But when I got the scholarship, I didn't believe it. The DHL office where the envelope for the university came in, Saraya, I went and I picked it up. And there happened to be a masjid there. So I stood in the steps of the mosque. I opened the letter and it says, congratulations, you're going to this. And I think I did tear up out of excitement or recognition of achievement because I wasn't in love with the local college. I went to Al-Azhar University in Gaza for a year, and I just felt I'm losing my place. It's just a cookie cutter education. It's hard to excel at that level. So I got the scholarship from BYU and I went, and you said my dad only gave me enough money, just barely, so I don't buy a one-way ticket back. And I thought about it. I honestly, when I had layover in Newark Airport for 13 hours, I was really counting the money. I was like, hey, can I go back? And I flew at the time from Tel Aviv. So it wasn't easy. And it wasn't back a month, 2 months of adjustment until you get busy with school. And the more you talk to your family, the more homesick you got and all these butterflies. But I credit my two friends from Jerusalem who just came to BYU as well at the time, and Ahmed Ibrahim, a Omani student, and we just became a trio and we supported each other. It was difficult without these guys, but also I kept myself busy, work, because everyone in Gaza would kill for that opportunity, and I was not going to blow it away because of that. And as Zaina knows, we didn't have plan B as Palestinians. We were always like, hey, you freaking make this work. And I think BYU was a good place for me to do that.
I think just really quickly, Ed, I really want to point out here, remind everyone that at that time, for people who don't remember, there were no FaceTime, there was no cell phone, or that came later. So the contact with family, because the same exact thing happened with me. Contact with family was limited. You had calling cards, you would scratch and wait, and then you would hear you have 2 minutes left. And no, and it was never easy to get through. So really, the struggle of homesickness at the time is very different in many ways than it would be at this point where you do have contact.
BYU is in Utah, correct?
Yes, in Provo.
Yeah, so you're going from Gaza to Utah. What was that culture shock like for you when you landed or you went on campus? What was that first experience? Because obviously it's a different group of people, right?
There's two cultural shocks. Is when you get to Utah and the other one when you leave Utah and you see Washington, D.C. So there's two, because you think America is Provo. And then this is your America, and you think, America after 5 years. And then you come to DC and you see, like, what? Are you speaking English? I don't understand. Honestly, it was difficult. The LDS community of the Mormon church are very communal. Sundays, for example, is cherish and Sunday dinner and potluck. That's it. No local businesses would open. The only place that would open is Borders or one of those locations, and we would just go there and study. That's the only place that will open its doors on Sunday. So Sundays were brutal. However, if you knew folks or you went to the ward or the church, then you're into that community. We didn't have that opportunity because we're not members of the church, but we felt there's always welcome. Every time I'm in the dorms at Thanksgiving, my roommate, hey, Hani, you want to go to Arizona? I go. Hey, Hani, you want to go to Montana? I go. You want to go to, they always invite people. They're always about including people. And it was a good experience overall. So I traveled a lot during college. I remember I got here before 9/11, and then 9/11 happened, and that changes a little bit of things. But I felt BYU was a safe place, very welcoming place. Obviously, they try to preach to you, try to get you to join the church. I consider that as an act of love. Then I moved to DC for an internship with a place that Zaina knows well, ADC. And that's how I got to Washington, D.C.
Hani, I know for a fact that you mentioned this, but you love to travel, and I know that you've been to, 48 states now? Are we there yet?
Yeah, the mainland, 48 states. I still have to go to Alaska and Hawaii, I think.
Amazing. That's really, really amazing.
I do it in honor of all the Palestinians who lack the freedom of movement. And it's not something I take for granted. I read somewhere that the average American sees only 12 states. And I don't know why. Maybe people can't travel or they don't have access to transportation or something. But my line of work allows me to go some places, but also I'm curious. You're in Chicago, drive 1 hour, you're in Iowa, khalas.
We got to get you a YouTube channel, Hani Travels or something catchy there so we can share those stories.
Right now, we have a lot of priorities, but I leave that to my daughter, Zaina, who likes to do TikTok videos.
There you go. And when you were at BYU, you were working pretty hard right off the bat. You were a custodian, you were doing dishes, you were mopping floors, and you were going to school. But there was one other interesting job you had, I think maybe later on. And just to add levity here, I watched a YouTube video of one of your comedic skits. Does everybody know that you're actually a comedian deep down?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. If I could pay you back the time you took, what a waste. So yes, I did mob, janitor, all that stuff. But then a year into BYU experience, I got offered a teaching job as an Arabic tutor. And I was hired exactly prior to 9/11. And there was only 20 students who genuinely wanted to learn Arabic and all that. And 9/11 happens, and then the class grows. All of a sudden, ROTC students, Army Reserve, a lot of people who want to work in the government, and that was the class to take. I worked with really great people, and I was teaching the Egyptian dialect for the most part. Then in college, there was clubs to do. We did the Arabic club. I was involved in that pretty much. And we did the Muslim club, MSA, I think. And there was a huge student presence. There was like 200 Muslim students. I think the numbers went down, but at the time, the church was recruiting a lot more students from our part of the world. Then we did comedy. That was fun, especially in my grad school, where I auditioned to a group called the Divine Comedy Club or something like that. It's a skit. And I was not accepted. I wasn't good enough. So my friend Tanner K, he said, "Hey, let's start a stand-up comedy club." And we did. Then we started doing comedy, and it was fun for about 2 years. We started a club called Humor U, and it was mostly making fun of college and sometimes about traveling while Palestinian and all that. But it wasn't good humor. And that was different. But I enjoyed that a lot. And it just teaches you a lot about public speaking and timing and all that stuff. But I have not done that. I have other priorities.
Yeah. But did you know you were funny, or you had that humor? Were you the comedian in your friends group, for example?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah. When you're the middle child with a lot of siblings, you have to get attention somehow. In college, it was noted a lot. People will tell me I should do comedy, I should do stand-up. I didn't even know what stand-up was. But anyway, I did that for fun for college, for the free pizza. That's important when you go to college. I do have a certain dark sense of humor sometimes. My colleague Layla Mukhayber tells me she could never tell what I mean. But anyway, as far as today, either cry or laugh. Really, you don't have many options. A lot of people can relate to this. And comedy is one way to do this. It gave me some calming moments in my life.
Whoever is listening to this, make sure you check it out on YouTube. Just search Hani's name, and I think it's going to be the second or third video if you have a chance. So you talked a little bit about your career. Just going over your track record, it was very clear that you wanted to always give back to the community. That was going to be your purpose in life. Did you consciously do that? Did it just happen that way, or how did that come about?
Honestly, in all candidness, I did an internship at ADC. That's the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. And I went back to graduate. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I wanted to do a master's degree. So in the year between the two, ADC called me back and they said, "Hey, can you come to DC? We'll give you $1,000 for travel and pay you this much. Can you do bookkeeping for us?" They had the accountant teach me and all that stuff. It took a while, but then I became the bookkeeper. From bookkeeping, you go into membership and a little bit of the grants, and you start getting curious. Then I go do my master's. I come back. I really thought I was going to work at some UN entity or World Bank, so that was really my main thing. And then I come back to DC, and then I work at ADC, and then I moved to the Jerusalem Fund. So they needed a grant and accounting associate. I did that for 5.5 years. It was fun because 3 things. 1, you raise money. 2nd, you help give it away by the direction of the board. And also you write these campaigns and you do the books. So it was really the best of these things. And they do small grants and things like that. After that, NERA had an opening. I applied, the recruiter reached out, and I got that job. Another 5.5 years, just raising money. And really, I joke, I hear Omar Kader say this, and I channel it as it's mine. He says, I became a full-time Palestinian. So I do that for a living. And honestly, raising money is not easy, but it's manageable if people relate to the stories you tell, people believe you're authentic, because people give to people, right? If Zaina goes to another institution, some people know Zaina there and they say, okay, I'll give to where Zaina goes. So there's a lot of that in our community. And for me, it's about 2 things, making sure that the organization has the resources they need to make the difference, but also helping donors do the great things they want to do. Oftentimes we feel small and helpless. I work at Apple, for example. I make $1 gazillion and I want to help and I don't know. So that's where the role of a development officer who will hey, can you do X, Y, and Z? You could make an impact. Or you could be in food stamps. We had somebody, she said, I don't have enough money, but I qualified for food stamp this month. Here's my $5. So that these are the kind of stories that we work with. And it's a struggle because you do your best job when your family is being genocided. This is where you're supposed to bring your A game. So if when the bombs stop falling, people move away or just cool a little bit, but really you have to bring your A game where the sky is falling. And that's the hardest part. But at the end, the better you are at your job, the bigger your role, the more impact you will have for the people that you care about most. So UNRWA was during the mini wars, 2014, 2018. I joined my colleagues at UNRWA USA in just late 2019. And I got the job there. I did a civil rights stint for 6 months. I did not love that job. So I went to UNRWA USA. They were looking for somebody to do fundraising. So I became their director of philanthropy. And my colleague Layla has always been my competition when I was at UNRWA, but friendly, dynamic attention even before I joined UNRWA USA. So we became a duo. She's the comms person. She's always been doing a good job there. I just became so to free her to do more comms and less of the fundraising, which she was very good at. Then our colleague, Mara Kroenfeld, who was on your show, I believe, she was hired as an executive director. We formed our team at UNRWA USA and did a lot to support UNRWA. That's the largest humanitarian actor inside Gaza right now. And it's been an interesting experience, but also it's a lot. We're not only raising money to help people, but we're also trying to guard our institution as well.
I think that some people might not know, Hani, so I want to take us a little step back, but UNRWA stands for United Nations Relief and Works Agency, right? But I want you, if you can, please discuss the difference between UNRWA USA and UNRWA in general, because I think it's important to show the different kinds of work. And then maybe we can talk a little bit more about UNRWA's role in Palestine as a whole.
Great. So UNRWA is the agency that's 75 years old that's been supporting the Palestinian refugees during difficult times and good times. Food assistance is a large program, education, healthcare, and social services, but also job creation. So remember, 99% of the staff are Palestinian refugees themselves. This is unique to UNRWA. It's not only helping the community, but also creating jobs and allowing refugees to make the difference themselves. Other agencies do a great job, but they also hire expats. Nothing wrong with that, but it's just UNRWA is set differently. UNRWA USA, on the other hand, is an American charity that exists for the sole purpose of elevating UNRWA in the US via fundraising, via storytelling, via advocacy. And that's what we do. If you give a donation to UNRWA, the UN agency, that's unrwa.org, it's going to make a great impact, but it wouldn't be a tax-exempt donation. Your employer may not match it because it's not an American charity. If you try to call Congress as an UNRWA donor, they're like, wait, this is a foreign entity. But if you work with UNRWA USA, you get the tax deduction. You get to match your donation from your company, and you also advocate because we have donors from Hawaii till Maine, people who we could rally and say, hey, can you talk to the members of Congress about the importance of UNRWA? Things like that. But we support UNRWA. UNRWA does have a U.S. office here, but when it comes to fundraising and making a difference, UNRWAUSA.org is the place to go.
UNRWA also, first of all, it's not just in Gaza. To be clear, it's all over Palestine and, of course, southern Lebanon and elsewhere. And I think it's really important to put in perspective what UNRWA has done. There's a big conversation to be had about NGOs, and particularly Western NGOs, coming into our spaces. But I think UNRWA in particular plays a role that very few, as you mentioned, agencies and organizations do. One of them is keeping track of all the names of the Palestinian refugees, where they came from and what they need, but also providing schools and hospitals, etc. throughout. My father actually also participated in a UNRWA school in Jerusalem. And his father as well is a product of an UNRWA school. So the impact of UNRWA is not minute and it is not small. It really has helped Palestinians deal with struggles that are inflicted by the settler colonialism that we've experienced for 77 years almost now. Hani, in what ways do you feel that UNRWA in and of itself has had an impact on your life and on the lives of the families around you?
So UNRWA is in Syria, UNRWA is in Lebanon, UNRWA is in Jordan. In fact, the largest refugee population for Palestine refugees is in Jordan, because that's the 67 and all that. There is a lot. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there is more than 2 million Palestine refugees in Jordan. My friend Sean Carey likes to say education is the religion of the Palestinians. So this is something we take seriously. This is why my dad is able to go to teach in the Emirates, because he got educated in UNRWA school. It is why my mom survived, thrived. She was able to have kids because she used to go something in Arabic called torma, a place where the kids go to eat, and they give them milk and a fish tablet, something like it has a nutrition like omega, and they would not give them the milk until they eat it. So that's one where UNRWA was making an impact in an area where it's really hard to make a difference. So UNRWA was doing large scale projects, but also another way is immunization. This is why we have a lot of Palestinians, mashallah, alhamdulillah, yani we tend to be healthier, we're not being genocided, because UNRWA, 99% of the Palestinians are vaccinated. That's higher than Germany. And this is something UNRWA takes seriously, to just make sure, hey, your kid is due for vaccination, come in. And that's one. And also job creation. The only reason my dad was able to leave the Emirates and be united with us in Gaza was because UNRWA offered him a job that paid him a dignified salary. So that's like the stories. And a lot of Americans here that I meet, they're like, hey, I'm a doctor here in the US, I'm an engineer, I received an UNRWA scholarship, I received an UNRWA support. So there was a time where if one of your parents is an UNRWA staff, you get like a $200 stipend monthly. So this way your kid can go to school. And it's not just like giving people food packages, which happens in the levels of millions, which is important. Remember, in Gaza, before October 7th, 1.1 million people were in food assistance. The dire need predates the horrible events of October 7th, and the clock did not start then. We have to remind people of this. So these are some of the things, the highlights of UNRWA, its impact in Palestine. And this is a UN agency that's solely dedicated for the well-being of the Palestinian refugees until a just political solution is found. And that's really a key word. Nobody can sunset the agency before a political solution is on the horizon.
Yeah, and I think it becomes very clear after everything you just detailed why the Israeli regime has banned UNRWA essentially from all of Palestine. 273 UNRWA team members have been killed by Israel. I think 205 UNRWA installations were damaged and over 665 incidents overall targeting UNRWA. I mean, it's no secret that they hate the fact that UNRWA has sustained Palestinians in a way that no other organization has been able to do that temporarily. What has it been like watching your colleagues right now deal with the impact? And we'll talk about more in detail about the genocide, but specifically about the UNRWA part here.
It's hard. It's the version that the Israelis are promoting about UNRWA and spending $150 million pushing in America and Hulu ads and all that stuff is not a version I recognize. This is a complete misinformation campaign, coordinated, is not grounded in reality. When the agency, UNRWA, has been cleared twice by separate and independent UN investigations, where the Israeli government has failed to provide evidence to those claims. They fired folks who the Israelis have failed to provide evidence against. One of them was reinstated because the name was Ahmed Muhammad or something like that, some common name. Now, look, these crimes are serious if they're proven, but they have not been shown. But what happens is, while the Israeli army is killing Palestinian workers who work for UNRWA and targeting UN flag vehicles, they do not go talk to the UNRWA or the UN. They go sit with the Wall Street Journal and just give things that have not been provided or corroborated by any party, and some media outlets are able to publish those. And they do damage the UNRWA's ability to provide services. Not only that, you're denying funds, you're also making it unsafe for UNRWA and UN staff to operate. And remember, UNRWA was the backbone of the humanitarian response inside Gaza. And all amazing UN agencies, they rely on UNRWA. Some of them have as much as 100 staff. UNRWA has 13,000 staff inside Gaza, so they could get stuff done. Remember, when they needed to vaccinate the Palestinian children, they called on UNRWA. When they needed to bulldoze the road and open it up, They called UNRWA when they needed fuel to be delivered. UNRWA came through. And this has been a trusted partner for all. UNRWA is not part of the conflict. The Israeli army keep dragging UNRWA to it. UNRWA is a neutral side. UNRWA does not take a stand. I don't believe they called it a genocide, what's going on. So they're trying to be really delivering aid and focused in that. There's other UN agencies that could do the political stuff. But despite this, the Israelis are convinced that if they take UNRWA, my family will stop being refugees, which is short-sighted because there is half a dozen of other UN entities that still preserve that right.
And I'm glad we separated UNRWA, the general, the larger one overseas, and then the UNRWA USA. Are you all in the US specifically, how are you being targeted by this current administration? I'm not going to even say what the name of the administration is, but this current administration, how are you being targeted, if you are at all? Do you have any concerns that they're going to just attempt to shut you down altogether?
I leave that to my colleagues in the administration. But what I recognize, and that's public, some right-wing Israeli group have litigated or suing UNRWA USA over some unreal or something like that. We think it's meritless, so we're fighting back against that, and we think we have a good chance. But I don't really have further information. I know that's one way that they're trying to intimidate and bully the work from happening. So that's one. Two, just the general climate, every single not-for-profit in our space feels threatened, and they're in the chopping block. And everybody's doing their resiliency plans, including UNRWA USA. Everybody's looking at standard operating procedures. Everybody's trying to make sure that everything is good to go. We know that, for example, the administration passed that order to never fund UNRWA. And that's hurtful because the US is the largest donor for UNRWA. They give $400 million a year. That's not coming back. That's going to hurt kids. That's going to hurt pregnant women. That's going to hurt a lot of people. For the time being, I don't believe UNRWA was feeling the impact at this minute because there is emergency funding happening. Some American donors, in fact, they would be happy to report that UNRWA USA, the third largest donor for UNRWA, because of the generosity we've seen in America, and we want to continue. Like, it's sad. I do not want to be the third largest. I want to be number 10 because that's good news. If other people, Germany, Japan, Qatar, they're all making donations to support UNRWA work. Now remember, these donations are voluntarily. They're not forced. They're not expected. Every year, the Commissioner General will have to go and give a report and ask for support for certain programs. And he's doing that and facing campaigns where the Israeli government, if you go on your phone and say donate to UNRWA, one of the first websites would be an Israeli government website spreading misinformation. We've seen billboards outside the UN system equating UNRWA staff and UN staff with certain militant groups. And that's unhelpful. I don't think the Israelis want to live in a world that UNRWA doesn't exist, because that means they have to do certain things they're unwilling to do. And I don't know where we move past that. I know for sure UNRWA remains in Gaza. UNRWA remains responding and delivering aid for the time being. And we're collecting donations to make sure UNRWA continues to operate. But we don't really know what the future holds. So there might be surprises along the way. So we're planning to be there as long as it takes. And I mourn the loss of my colleagues. And I feel sorry for everybody who's hurting in Gaza, who's trying to deliver aid and feel unsafe to do so.
I think it's really important here. First of all, absolutely really awful, the murder of all of the UNRWA people, of course, of all Palestinians there. But I think it's really important that something that you mentioned about UNRWA USA being targeted in the US. I think it's important to note here that there is a concerted effort by not just Israeli government, but also by the American government and others to pass laws and bills to criminalize essentially organizations that do support and work on Palestinian rights, whether it's organizations like UNRWA or student organizations. And these laws, if they pass, and some of them have, make it that much harder for organizations that support Palestinian rights or Palestinian organizations to function within this structure in the American system. It is important that we note that the attack is not just on foreign soil. The attack is also on Palestinian organizations and organizations who support Palestinian rights here in the United States. I really do hope that people listening to this do pay attention, because these bills might be passed along as protecting Americans, but really they're infringing on the American people's rights, infringing on our freedom of speech, infringing on people's willingness and need to support the Palestinian people one way or another. So please keep an eye out for these bills, and they are popping up at the state level as well. Get active, get involved, and try to defeat them. And I'm happy to talk about this a little bit later. Any comment on that one?
Yeah, we're in the side of angels. We're trying to make sure babies have baby formula and moms have food. And if that's going to get us in trouble, so be it. This is a free country, and I'm proud American. I love this country still. But at the end of the day, I'm going to make sure my family and my neighbors have food to eat. And I'm going to do it for as long as I can.
So, Hani, I'm going to make a very difficult pivot, and I'm going to read something here that you said in one of your other talks or interviews. My world shattered for the first time on November 24th, 2023, when Israel dropped a bomb on the family home where my brother lived, killing him, his wife, and their 4 beautiful children. Where were you when you got that news? And how did you, if you're okay with talking about it, of course, how did you immediately process that?
Yeah, this is the killing of my brother Majid, Allah yarhamu, and his wife Safa, and their daughters Riman, Siwar, and boys Ali and Omar. I don't know if it made it harder or easier that we were with them a few weeks prior, because we take the girls, the family in the summer to spend in Gaza, and we left in mid-August. My mother reminds me that in my time of Gaza, I would wake up every day and then I go race to go spend the time with my brother Majid. I'll just go and then hang out with him at the shop. And she only told me that's the thought after my brother was killed. So she takes comfort that I got to spend time with him and hang out with him. Well, he's my childhood friend. We got in trouble together, shenanigans, bikes. I saw him as a child cross the street and get hit by a van, and alhamdulillah, he survived, and he grew to be a good father and amazing guy. And you always thinking about end of life. I have to do this. He would not talk gossip about people. He would just rise above anything. He would always do good. We would do work with him in Ramadan, especially get care and food packages to people. He had his bike. He would go and just deliver it. And he doesn't wait, because he said, I want to wait till tomorrow because they may need it. And he just does it because he loves these deeds. And then when I learned the news, I was here, it was 3 a.m. My nephew from Greece is the one who called me and said, Addamallah Ajakum, your brother Majid was killed with his family, and we haven't found the bodies. Only one body flew out of the building and we recovered. And that's when it gets real and personal, because it was always about my people, the collective, and now it became about my sibling, Majid. And it was hard. You drive the highway and then boom, somebody had to make that decision to kill your brother. And this person is traveling around the world pretending to be a good person, protecting democracy. Guess what? My brother is a full-time civilian. He's helping people. In fact, a day or two before he was killed, he went to give our neighbor a couple of bucks because they needed to buy food. He himself was looking for water because there was no drinking water, and somebody ran into him and said, tomorrow I'll bring you water. And the next day the person went there and then there is no Majid. So that's the pain that we live with. That's the struggle we know. And my mom had it worse because she knew he's dead in the rubble, but she had to protect their bodies from the dogs, because there is stray dogs that are starving as the humans, and they may sneak in and get between the destroyed walls. So she was calling me here, Yamma shufilna jarrafa, Yamma shufilna ish, and she knows her child is dead. He's not coming back, but she wants to give one last motherly act to give him a proper burial. And that's, you do not forget that. And it could destroy you. It could turn you into drugs. It could turn you into religion. It could turn you into a lot of things. You could be depressed and not get out of bed, all legitimate things. But at the end, we had to pick ourselves and just do as much as we can, because guess what? The next devastation is right around the corner. If you're a Palestinian, you know this is the case. And it happened 2 weeks after, when we saw my other brother in his boxers paraded like an animal circus by the Israeli army, calling him terrorist in Hebrew. He's never fought anything. He's not even physically fit. When journalists, I emphasize journalists, ask questions, the Israelis let him go because they said, oh yeah, that's not a fighter. And then 2 weeks later, we had another trauma in the family, and they keep coming. And whatever gives you peace, you have to seek refuge in that.
So this is very difficult, but I just want to, for the audience to understand how insidious this is. Your sister-in-law, Safa, you essentially had to bury her twice, correct?
Yes, they recovered. When they dug, they were doing it by hand. There is no heavy machines to dig or remove the walls. The person who found it followed their nose. They said something doesn't smell right here, and they found the body, but they could only get to it in a certain time. They pulled, and then there is half of her, and the other half was in the separate row. So they took whatever they could get. They opened up a grave with her daughter, and then they buried her. And the next day, they got to work again, and they recovered the rest of the body and buried her. Now, Safa is keeps to herself. She loves her family. And then a month prior to her death, Israeli army killed all of her family in one bomb, 17 people. And Majid, my brother, went to bury them, collecting them in plastic bags. He would not even show Safa, his wife, what he buried. And she mourned them, and then she joined them, courtesy of American weapons and the Israeli army.
So assuming when people make it, the probability is not very high when Israel is just bombing indiscriminately. We know that. But there are methods of survival. And one of them I read was that families were eating animal feed or trying to use animal feed to make different types of food or product. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I first read about this in the Al Jazeera report, and I thought maybe a case or two. But then a day later, I saw my sister grinding some rabbit food, and I posted the video on social media, and she was grinding the rabbit food, and she said she wanted to make some flour. For 2 months, they had only eaten all the pasta. There is no more flour. For 55 days of the early nightmare, nothing got into Gaza. So they started doing rabbit food, and she said it smelled so bad. The cat was so good, too good for it. So she wouldn't eat it. And that triggered a response here for me. I was raising millions of dollars for an amazing agency for food, and here's my own family is being starved. And my American friends here were sending me money in Venmo and Zen, like, hey, Hani, go figure out what to do in the North. And that's a moment where you just have to figure out something. But it is true, people ate what they could find. And we could talk more about that in your next question, maybe.
Yeah, I think you said something earlier to me that just demonstrates the character you have. You said we have to step up when the times are difficult, not when they're easy, and be on our A game. And you and your brother clearly stood up and said, you know what, we're going to open the Gaza Soup Kitchen. We're not going to have this happen. We're going to make sure that we take care of our people so they're eating better food, generally speaking. What was going through your mind when you decided to create that?
So I had left some money with my brother Majid for emergencies and things like that. And that money had run out. And then when Majid was killed, he had some money on him. Remember, we could not get money. There's no banks. So we've used my dead brother's money to feed the neighborhood for the first week because nobody can get money around. He had about $12,000 on him or something like that. That's the only cash we started cooking for people using my brother's money because he doesn't need it anymore. So Mahmoud started the first thing he bought. There was a caterer who made rice, and he would sell these rice tray, no chicken, nothing. Maybe lucky if you find some chickpeas on them. And then we did that for a few days. That was around January of 2024. And then he said, okay, let me start doing food parcels. At the time, he could find some za'atar, some ilab pool, fava beans, some tomato paste. And he would give him even wipes, wet wipes, because that's what they could find. And these were expensive items, but we wanted to do something, give people some hope. We will give a couple of hundred of those. And then Chef Mahmoud, he wasn't a chef. He said, like, I'm going to start cooking. So he got 3 really large pots. Every pot serves at least 40 to 50 families. And he started making soup. The first day he made soup for 120 families using potato he found in Beit Lahia. And then overgrown zucchinis. So the zucchinis were supposed to be picked 2 months prior, but they kept growing because it's winter and there is rain. So, Palestinian, like the bounty of the land, Allah بيحب Palestine, خير Palestine. But we were happy we have this kind of food. So he would chop it up and then we'll make it into tomato soup. The first day he did it, I didn't see anything from him. I only learned about it from Telegram news, like, hey, good news. There is a soup kitchen in North Gaza, and this guy was pointing to where he got his pot of soup. And at the time, it was real. Like, people were starved and kids starting to get into hospital from malnourishment. I could name names. I have pictures I could send you of the kids who are malnourished. And then Mahmoud says, okay, khalas, we did it. And then on the next day, the kids show up at his house, wake him up, and they say, hey, Abu Umar, are you going to make food for us? And he's a dad. He's a goofball. He's like, okay, I'll do it. So he started cooking again, but this time using foraged beza, Swiss chard, rijla, silig, all these items that come with the rain. So Beit Lahi used to be the bread basket. So we are able to get these items and cook with minimal material, just basically filtered water, some cooking oil, some stock, salt, and whatever veggies we have. There is no chicken. There is none of that. So we kept doing that for as long as we did. And the best thing he did is hired his friend who used to fry falafel, this hag, to become the photographer. Wallahi, I was telling myself, he's in the middle of a genocide. Then he's telling me he hired a photographer. I didn't understand. And boom, Ishaq is a gifted photographer. And he takes these quality, really like sexy food shots. And people here, like, oh, this looks delicious. Like, they're forgetting there is a genocide, but they're like, oh my gosh, this is so hearty. This looks like something I want to eat. So that's one of the first thing we did is presentation and make sure the food looks good. Not hayallah, like here is some soup, get out of here. And we wanted people to know about dignity. In general, people think, oh, in Palestine, they eat wherever, they eat grass. But we wanted to really counter that narrative and just show beautiful shots and some hope. There is nothing more powerful than a smiling child with a pot of soup. And that was really powerful. And then we took it to GoFundMe, and feel free to stop me. This can go for very long. We took the story to GoFundMe. My friend Nahid Al-Rayis copyrighted the campaign. And then, boom, it started raising money and became a thing. People share, here's a soup kitchen, here is a way to help. And it was supposed to be kept like a small, not go viral or something like that. And then I told Chef Mahmoud, Allah yarhamu, I said, I'll give you a week warning if we run out of money, but you keep cooking and plan ahead. But I'm not going to stop on you. You have this, and if I have to stop because we don't have money, I'll give you a week notice. Yeah, and we ran out of Chef Mahmoud, but not from money. So he kept cooking, and then the amazing people, they did a great job just pitching the story to a lot of media people. And it became NBC, CNN, and op-ed and all that. Mahmoud even wrote an op-ed to the Washington Post with the help of Layla Haddad. And that's how it became our response. And my colleagues at UNRWA USA were supported because we really want to make sure people have the food they need. And UNRWA was restricted from going to the north at the time. Now they're back fully. So that tells me the kind of quality people I work with. It's easy to get territorial and say, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. But alhamdulillah, people see this and they support it. So that's how the soup kitchen came about.
Hani, I want to point out that we're around the anniversary of the soup kitchen starting. In one of the interviews, you said it started around Valentine's Day. So it's amazing that it's been a year. The power of it, you all have maintained it. One of the very, very powerful things for me was in one of your interviews, you said the land helped when no one else would. You mentioned this right now in our conversation where you were saying they were picking anything they can at the beginning and making something out of it. Leafy greens, everything grows naturally, and the land helped them when no one else would. That was really powerful, and it's very true, and it speaks volumes to the power of our attachment to our land, because it's not just political, it's genuinely a survival issue. The native, they care for the land, and the land cares from them, as opposed to the occupier when all we see is destruction. And I do want to mention here, for those who don't know and who should follow you and follow the work, Hamoudi has become a huge hit. This beautiful young child who shows up diligently with his little pot requesting food. Tell us a little bit about Hamoudi.
Yes, so Hamoudi is a fun child, a fun-sized Palestinian child. just a run-of-the-mill Palestinian kid who just has $1 million smile. He shows up with his pot, and the crew they're bored. They're cooking the fire all day, smoke in their eyes, and this guy comes, and they're playful with him, and he's brightens their day. And then our Aboud, our photographer, hey Hamoudi, how are you? Where's your pot? Hey, where's your shoes? What you're up to? And then these things, we post a lot of updates. This is the update that stuck with people, and people start, if I don't post, hey, where's Hamoudi? I could tell them my brother get killed. They say, I'm sorry, but where's Hamoudi? Like, people just get so attached to Hamoudi. He's a displaced Palestinian child from Tel El Hawa. His father moved him to Zawaida near our kitchen, and every time they come and they get served. He's a good guy with his sister Maria, and he's somebody that we try to keep updates on. He is now in North Gaza, closer to where our family is, but we see him every now and then. Nobody should really be seen at the soup kitchen. It should not be like, hey, we want to see him again. No, I don't. The less soup kitchens we open, the better, because that means people have more means to eat. And back to the land, yes, I saw this footage of an Israeli soldier grabbing Palestinian peppers from Gaza and somewhere in Beit Lahia. And they made it as a joke or something like that. But it is true. The land in Gaza has been close to nuked as it can be, and still produced leafy greens to feed the community when the crossings were closed. Remember, people think about aid, it has to come from outside, and it should. But we were like, hey, can we figure out what's in there? And a lot was destroyed. A high risk. The guy who picked the zucchini, one of the men was killed by a drone. Food is resilience, and we've talked about this many times. So Hamoudi, will check with him soon, inshallah, but we'll give you an update. He's such a cute guy, Allah me, adorable, and Khalilu Ahli.
And I just want to talk about your brother Mahmoud for a second, because he quite literally kept people alive. Through his food as well, he kept spirits alive and powerful. And the Israelis did see that, and he became a target because of that. And I say that just to show the power that your brother had and the inspiration that he is for all of us. Know that he was putting himself at risk every single day. But he used his superpower. His superpower was being a chef. And he made sure that he gave back to the community. But the Israelis did recognize that. Am I correct? A drone targeted him. Is that correct?
Yeah. So Mahmoud helped thousands of people every week with food. And his kitchen became the center of the community, where he put music and kids show up and wait for the food, and they do dabka. Some kids dress up to come to the kitchen so they can take photos, to be seen, to be recognized. And the photographers always are happy to snag a picture of these kids. There is a lot of times where he would do fun activities for the kids. We'll give him snacks, whatever he can. In Eid, he managed to get some toys. I don't know how he did that. He did that a lot. And food. He ran a kitchen that fed its high 800 families. Food. Sometimes they will cook things that are impossible. One time he called me, sometimes in April, and he said, hey, Hani, I'm going to do hashulesh. I told him, you're in the middle of a famine and a genocide. What are you talking about? I'm going to grill. I was like, wait, what's going on? Then they started, my sister Fatin introduced this spam, the halal spam virgin. They will take it and slice it, and then they just season it and roll it in a shawarma wrap, and then tell people this is shawarma, and they will grill it in charcoal. And I thought that gives people a taste that they've missed for a long time. So that's the kind of guy. He's always trying to push the envelope. What else can I do? I'm going to make rice pudding today, and figure out how to do it. And really, he's a business guy. So he'd use his business sense like, hey, there is a shipment of this. I'm going to buy it now because tomorrow it will be gone. Expand it to the medical point. He opened the medical point that literally saved lives. This is when Kamal Adwan Hospital was under attack. The nurses and the doctor will do first aid for people and save their lives to send them to the other hospital, Indonesia, I think. So a lot of that happened. And then he opened a school, gave people hope. Okay, we're going to live. And for 3 weeks, it taught kids. Then had that famous Hebrew sign on it, don't bomb, please. And they still bombed it for no purpose. There is no purpose to bomb it. It was empty. But they just wanted to bomb. And right in the heart of the sign where it has the U.S. flag. He did a lot, and we knew that he's in some radar. We thought raising his profile will protect him. We knew our brother Majid, may his memory be eternal, was killed nameless and faceless for so many. We figured if we do the opposite, it will protect Chef Mahmoud. But we were wrong. This is a special order assassination for a chef. Can you think, like, when the Israeli soldiers high-five each other, hey, I killed the militant, I killed the combatant, I killed this leader. And the guy is like, oh yeah, I killed the chef. Can you imagine the kind of brutality they have? And they left 30 feet away from the house. They targeted him 30 yards away from the house. They killed him, and his kids were just not too far from him. And the videos of what they've done to him, it just said, yeah, this is just to kill. And they wouldn't even let people take him to the hospital. There was a sniper shooting their way, so they couldn't get him to the hospital. And then he was buried in a makeshift grave. And when people returned to the north, we made plan to move him to the cemetery. They just wrapped him in a blanket and put him in a ditch, basically. Think about the dignity that the Israelis afford us. Then, because they couldn't go to the cemetery, there's quadcopters that just kill, only. I wrote something, I said, the dead cannot bury the dead, only the living can. And that was emotional for our family. They go to the cemetery, they try to find the graves of Majid, the one who was buried a year prior. They couldn't. The Israelis rolled over the graves, and it became unrecognizable. How do you go? Like, hey, where is my mom? I want to go see her. Where is my sister, Hani? I want to read Al-Fatiha for her. You're robbed from that opportunity forever. So you can imagine people are digging graves only to find bones of unknown people, and then Mahmoud is buried there. And what a difficult situation to process and unpack. Even there was 2 people who were buried the same day with Mahmoud. They didn't have any money, and my brother Muhammad paid for whatever the grave is, like $100, something like that. So they did put him in a new shroud, a white shroud. He was buried, and the family takes comfort. They say his body was in a good condition, just basically 2 months after, and he looks like he was just killed. They say he's still bleeding until now. So a lot of things that give people comfort, but it's a messy situation. And if I could use the F word now, I would.
No one would blame you if you did.
And that's my little brother. That's the guy who, in Arabic, he calls himself Asad al-Shimal, the Lion of the North. And we still have his picture now on all our vests, the logo, all that stuff, to remember what this is all about. We're not going to be intimidated. No one would have blamed us if we stopped helping our community. But nobody in the team said, I want out. Everybody said, we will cook and feed, because people will not stop being hungry if Chef Mahmoud is killed. Allah yarhamu, we will miss him, but we will continue to do this, because as Palestinians, we really have to press on for each other. We're not counting on anybody to show up for us, by the way. I don't want to talk about the political stuff, but at the end, if we can do one thing, we should do it, whether by telling your manager about a post that's anti-Palestinian, or by just speaking out, or even in the Super Bowl.
Hani, Allah yarhamhum. يضل عمرك. This is unimaginable, truly unimaginable. And I want to emphasize something that you said. The stories as a whole, like the Zionist regime is not just satisfied with murdering people and killing people in mass. They also don't want Palestinians to rest in peace by destroying the cemeteries and preserving the history. What we try to preserve in the dignity of the dead, they do this to maintain the level of dehumanization that continues towards the living and the dead. And it's just unimaginable. To me, Hani, I've watched you throughout, and every single time you make an announcement, and I'm sorry, it's really hard to have this conversation without choking up, and it's been really hard to figure out the questions, because there are no questions that do this justice. There are no sentences that make you feel better, or anybody in Gaza feel better, other than to say, we're with you, and we're behind you, and we support you, and we're grateful for all the work that you've done. It's just unbelievable. And to Mahmoud, and to Majid, and to all of your family, to Fatin, and your mom in particular also. I mean, she's been so resilient in going through it time and time again, and still on her feet, and still helping, and still being present, not just for her family, but for her community as well. All of you all. But Hani, I've watched you, and I've heard you announce the killing of your siblings, and I struggle. Like, how do you continue? You're so strong. How do you find it within yourself to keep going? What is it?
I mean, it's tough, because like sometimes I ask myself, should I tell people about Mahmoud who's got killed? Should I not? Because oftentimes there's so many nameless Palestinians who get killed. And for every Hind Rajab, Allah yarhamha, we have 10,000 other Palestinians that the world doesn't know. I feel it's an obligation to tell their stories. And I have to admit, when the genocide started, I was talking to the media with the hope that it will make a difference. It did not. But then when they killed Chief Mahmoud, I told the producers, I'm happy to talk to you. I just know I'm doing it just for history's sake, not that it will make a big difference, and to make the story real to people and relatable as much as I can. People let us down. All of a sudden, they want to talk about us in the context of what the current president just said. They're like, hey, what do you think of this? You never told me what's my reaction about the ceasefire. It's just a very heartless world. I don't know. I think if I wasn't doing this humanitarian work, I imagine I could probably hurt myself or just be depressed. It's hard and it's unfair and it keeps going, but the best thing I can do is to keep and press on, because if I just go and disappear and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna go and worry about my family and how to get them out, the bad guys, when we're Palestinians, our story is riddled with suffering. It doesn't have to be. People in Gaza don't want to suffer. But this is what's happening to them. This is the price to pay for being attached to their land. And what the Israelis did not take, the Israeli government did not take with genocide, they're not going to take in negotiation. They've done horrors. There's going to be museums and books, and people going to have PhDs writing about this situation in Gaza. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. These guys don't care. And the best way for you to be present and just call them out. It wasn't easy for me to go on CNN and challenge the IDF and say, all right, I challenge you. Why did you kill Sheikh Mahmoud? They're nasty people. Do you think my personal safety is not in the line where I go? Alhamdulillah, I've been fortunate. I haven't faced any of those things. And my colleagues got death threats and all that. I get comments all the time, negative trolling. It doesn't scare me. I think about our relative, Ahmed Almadhoun, the paramedic who went with his buddy Yusuf Zimmo to go in the ambulance, pick up Hind Rajab. He marched, knowing going to a dangerous zone to rescue a little girl. Hind Rajab will be killed, Yusuf will be killed, and our cousin Ahmed Almadhoun was killed. I think about the courage they had. They did not do this because they're stupid. They did this out of duty, an obligation for Palestinians to raise each other up and try to look out for each other and protect each other. They were killed. Whatever I'm going to suffer doesn't compare to what these guys have gone through. I love and miss my brother Mahmoud. I still look at the pictures and the likes, what things made him like, what photos, and all the chats we had. We're going to recover at some point, but I draw inspiration from the faith of my mom and the resilience of my people. This is really what comes down to.
Amazing. And I think now that we're talking about this administration and the proposals and the nonsense that they're talking about, you had such a powerful quote and you said, forcing Palestinians out of Gaza is as realistic as draining the ocean. Talk about how you feel about this whole crazy proposal, like the literal length from this administration.
Whatever the administration does, I'm going to talk about me. I know I'm a member of a WhatsApp group for Palestinians from Gaza or Americans. And every single one of those folks is trying to find a way to go back to Gaza. Gaza's been erased, but the people always want to return and to help and to support. I'm not going to say there are Palestinians who would leave if they're sick. They need to be reunited with their relatives outside. I get that. Students, there's no colleges and all that. But for the most part, after what happened and making people leave the north to the south, it will take a lot more than tanks and bombs to separate the people from their land. That's what the people say. This is not just an empty Arabic slogan. This is real. People really know. They're smart. They're aware of what's going to happen. I was taken to evacuate Omar for medical evacuation in Turkey. Because of what they said, we're not leaving. So this is the impact that they're having. Okay, then we're stubborn people. Some guy cannot talk about us as if we were like cattle and a herd of like we're the other. We're not even existing. I doubt he talked to any Palestinians before they. But as Palestinians also, we have to put forward our ideas. We cannot be reacting. What is our plan? And we've challenged. You've seen me said, hey, there's 60,000 Palestinians with families in the US. You could talk to your party about bringing those back. And you understand this is going to be an awkward conversation too. Palestinians can go in the West Bank and live if you let them from Gaza until you rebuild Gaza. It doesn't have to be some other place. And I am hopeful our people are resilient, but we have to deliver water for them. That's a basic thing. Get them some food, get them some blankets. and do what we can. It is one thing to be a keyboard warrior. I love and respect, and I follow so many, but also you have to add to it. What else are you doing to help the people stay on their land? Palestinians have suffered enough. They've lost everything and they need everything. So please, folks really need to rally from the now until the unforeseeable future. Everybody should say, okay, 5 or 1% of my income going to go to Gaza to help those communities, because it does make a difference. It is not a black box donation. If you give to UNRWA USA, it's going to go make a difference. But it's not just in giving. There is the advocacy part, equally important. There is also showing up to the coffee hour for your member of Congress every time, respectfully. Let them know you care about this. I used to go early on to talk to members of Congress in my personal capacity as an American citizen. They rarely take any notes. The one time they take notes is when I tell them how much money we raised in their state from donors, because they think, oh, if these people gave $1 million for UNRWA USA, they may give to my opponent. So this is when you really have to win the money game. I tell young people, make as much money as you can. A person who is at top of IBM or Intel, who is a supporter of Palestine, is equally important as me and my family who serving soup through the Gaza Soup Kitchen, because we need each other. Without fuel in the tank, we can't win elections. We cannot serve soup to people. And yes, boycott any bad actors, not just in Gaza. It's one thing that is easy. Like it sucks to go to an Arabic restaurant that they're selling that fizz water or wine. There is options. And anyway, I'll give you a break.
No, that's great. That's great information. And I just want to say, and I think I speak for Zaina too here as parents, shout out to your parents for raising stand-up individuals. Your heart and your soul is in this every single day. It seems like every time there's a challenge, your family has stepped up. So I just wanted to acknowledge that your parents raised some great kids. And I hope that my kids are able to live in that sort of shadow with you too, and be able to establish that same character and courage. So I appreciate that. Speaking of courage though, you did, and this will be the last question possibly, but you did attend a hearing at Congress with Rashida. You were a guest where Netanyahu was giving a talk, and you were the guest there, and obviously you were there listening to it. What was going through your mind? And because if I was in there, I probably would have started screaming. I don't know, would have been able to contain myself.
Yeah, I was honored to be a guest of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. She asked me and she said she wanted to be in the room because the Palestinian voice is often missed. And she said, this is America. We have to be there. I said, sure, I will go. It's tough because a lot of my community wouldn't go because they weren't going to go and wait 2 minutes and then get arrested. I went there. I think I wore my keffiyeh, handkerchief. When I had this, I went there, and then it's like a different planet. I'm an astronaut now. When I went to that room, I feel like, wow, this is people who have so much power and control, and they think they're victims. You have people who flew in private jets next to me, one from Ohio, one from Pittsburgh. They're insurance brokers. And we hang out. Hi, Harry, I'm a Palestinian. I sat there, and the best he could muster is, hey, I like your outfit. And it was like a silencing mechanism. Yeah, my wife picked it. And then he started talking about his daughters, and I talked about mine. And we were listening before Shaitan comes. And then there was next to me some Israelis who were actually protesting Bibi Netanyahu. They were evicted like 2 minutes into the speech quietly. They had T-shirts on, and there are people who have hostages in Gaza. They wanted them to be rescued. And other than that, it was just a love fest. Our politicians honored Netanyahu with standing ovations and all that. He got more love than he gets in Tel Aviv. And it's sad because even the American president does not get as much love. I was happy to be in the room. The same moment where he said there is no civilians killed in Rafah, especially. My friend Adnan Al-Khaloud was killed, who was a friend and a patron of the soup kitchen. He was killed. There was a little hill. He was trying to get internet so he could call his brother who's in the south, and he was killed. The same thing, same moment. So that's hard. I treated it as a comedy. When I went there, I was like, okay, this is a comedy show. And that's what made me just feel, don't overreact, pace yourself. And obviously security was very tight. And I know that their eyes were looking at me. But at the end, I was blessed to be in that room with a fighter like Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who was a friend of mine. and all of us.
You mentioned Kahlout. We're talking about the director of the Kamal Udwan Intensive Care Unit.
There is two Kahlout. There is Adnan al-Kahlout and there is Ahmed al-Kahlout. Dr. Ahmed al-Kahlout was killed the day before my brother Mahmoud. He asked him the last day, the last conversation they had. Remember, my dad was injured and he needed a painkiller. Dr. Ahmed Kahlout found one or two and he said, Mahmoud, I don't want any money, but if you can get me a can of tomato paste, I would be grateful. And Mahmoud went and found one, and then the guy was killed just outside his home by Masjid al-Qasr. And that's what it felt like. Mahmoud was shaken. And remember, Dr. Hasan Abu Safiya is a family friend. We know his family, and we used to support him, sending blankets, whatever things they needed, flour. And I think that's how Mahmoud got in the attention of the Israeli army. And they sent a drone. Can you think like how many thousands of dollars they spent to kill a chef? They could have said, Hani, they had my number. They had his number. They said, we don't need you here. He would have left. I did my best, but no, they had to kill him. And I tell you, and you mentioned this in your call earlier in this conversation, people left, many families left the north when Mahmoud was killed because they said, this is the guy who used to provide water. We know he's a big deal, and they killed him. Who am I to last these guys? And many of our friends, in fact, the home that hosted the soup kitchen was also demolished, and the medical point, and my dad's store, all that stuff. There is very little military reason for this. They want to inflict damage, and they want to make sure every single Palestinian be taught a lesson. The Israelis should try therapy, but their therapy is what they're doing. Dr. Fadi Jula tells me something that's profound. He said, the Israelis don't know themselves. They no longer know themselves without Palestinians to oppress. And I think that's very profound.
And I don't think there is a stronger way to wrap up. Hani, thank you so much for spending time with us. Again, you are a true role model for all of us. I think you are in DC, so maybe the three of us can get together for lunch at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm glad that we had some time to catch up and see what's going on.
Hani, Allah yaqawwikum. All our love to your mom and your sister, and may they continue to be safe, and inshallah,
Ameen.
for all Palestine. Thank you for everything that you do, Hani.
Listen, stay tuned, cause it's time for some mood.